Buen día, amigas de Criptonoticias. Hoy estoy acá en la LaBITConf 2019 en la ciudad de Montevideo y estoy con Jimmy Song, un famoso investigador sobre Bitcoin que además es autor de uno de los últimos libros que salió sobre Bitcoin, así que quisiera conversar un poco con él. Hi Jimmy, how are you?
Hola.
How's your Spanish?
Hablo un poquito.
Nice. I thought you didn't speak any Spanish, so I think that goes better.
Yeah.
So how do you like the conference?
It's been fun. A lot of warm people. South American people tend to be very warm, and for some reason you have to kiss on the cheek anytime you say hi or something like that.
I'm from Venezuela, and that was because down south they do kiss, and so we can shake hands or kiss.
Okay.
But here.
Everybody
kisses.
So I was like,
it's a little hard to get used to.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I grew up. I'm an Asian person, so that's not me. So it's it takes some getting used to.
It takes some time to get used to it. They do it out of friendship and love, so.
Yeah, so.
I guess it's fine. It's not harassment if it comes from a friendship place.
I hope not. Yeah, I don't want to be harassed.
Most of the time, then.
Yeah.
So, you gave a talk today. You talked a lot about why Bitcoin is important, and I want for you to share with the people who are seeing us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I talked about incentives and how they change with Bitcoin as opposed to the current system. And the big thing to realize, and the main point that I wanted to get across, is that our current system is really messed up. There's no good store of value for individuals, so in order to keep the wealth that they have to invest, which ends up being a lot of work. And that's work that could be going towards new goods and services and so on, which they can't do because you want to preserve the little bit of money that you have. And in order to preserve it for the future, you have to do all this research and stuff. There's also a problem of a lot of asset inflation because there is no good store of value. So real estate all over the world is massively inflated, right? Like there's a utility value that you get out of renting a house, but the asset prices are way higher than they should be because people use it as a store of value. I mean, it's gotten to the point where in China people are like buying second homes that nobody lives in, right? Like that's how much they want a good store of value. So they build an entire empty city so people can buy more real estate. It's insanity. But yeah, there's a lot of things like that at every level, right? Like companies are just absolutely gigantic and they have no real reason to be, but they are because the central banks and essentially give these big companies money through commercial loans and so on. And ultimately that leads to these companies having unfair advantages over everybody else. And at the nation level, all that money printing, creates all sorts of moral hazards and people that are doing things that are that don't add any value whatsoever, bureaucrats and so on, and politicians that can promise you anything and everything because they think they can print money whenever they want, which they can, but they're essentially taking from everybody else, and that in turn causes at the global level everybody to basically suffer from the dollar hegemony. The U.S. has advantages that every other country does not because everything's on the dollar standard, and that means that like all of the problems that we talked about, they're like 10 times worse in third world countries and so on. And it's a sad reality that all of this human talent and human capital goes wasted because these people are monetarily oppressed.
There has been a lot of talk this year, like most people on at least crypto Twitter, they have come to the realization that Bitcoin can't fix everything, which used to be like a common knowledge when you came to these conferences 3 years ago. It was like, Bitcoin can fix it. So how can Bitcoin actually fix this?
Well, so by at the individual level, if you have a good store of value that doesn't have a lot of friction and transaction costs and so on, then people can it's a lot more fair, right? Like one of the perceptions right now is that you have to know a lot to invest in real estate or stock or something like that. You have to not only have capital, but you have to know what to invest in and get all insider info and get whisper numbers from Wall Street and all that. It looks like a luck game, and it kind of is, because the people that profit are the ones that have knowledge that others do not. Similar thing with real estate and things like that, like which markets are hot, which are trendy, kitchen styles or whatever. You have to know absolutely everything in order to make all that work. With Bitcoin, it's just a fungible asset. So a Silicon Valley insider and somebody in Indonesia, they have the exact same opportunity, which and you get the same upside and everything. It's a lot more fair. So a lot of people don't put as much time and effort into research, and instead they create new goods and services so they can make more money. And that's a completely different mentality. And I think it changes things at that individual level, and that in turn starts changing things at the company level, because because central banks' money becomes less valuable, then you have smaller companies that have a lot of inherent advantages over big companies, start to thrive, and big companies that are just eating from the trough of government generosity just start to starve. And the world right now has just way too many giant corporations that are completely unfeeling and basically sociopathic, psychotic companies that exist right now. Them going away wouldn't be a bad thing, and having smaller companies that are much more attuned to the needs of the local community and stuff like that would be much better. And then at the government level, you won't have governments that can just print money. They have a budget that they have to stick to. They have to actually tax their citizens in order to get money, instead of just printing money whenever they want, which is really a form of an involuntary tax. And that in turn causes a much more limited government, which I think is beneficial, because then people start becoming more personally responsible, and ultimately that ends up in nation states that are experimenting more, trying different things, and compete for citizens instead of oppressing them in every way they can.
So I think it has to do a lot with access. Like you said, somebody in Indonesia can use it just as much as the investor in Wall Street. So why Bitcoin and not, let's say, Libra?
Yeah, well, Libra is really an extension of the dollar, so I mean it doesn't change anything, right? But with Bitcoin, it's a politically neutral money, and no one controls it, and that's the key property. With almost everything else, if somebody controls it, well, they can affect the monetary policy. They can favor one group over the other. I mean, you can see this like very clearly in something like Bitcoin Cash, for example. I mean, almost the exact same code base, right? But there's a central authority, Amory Suchet and to some degree Roger Ver and so on. They decided, okay, big blocks, we're going to subsidize that as much as possible, right? Like and at the cost of centralization. And I mean, they've been trying to push the merchant thing for BCH for a long time. Very little traction, right? Like and nobody I know really uses that for that purpose, despite Roger Ver spending like so much money trying to promote it. And this is kind of, it reminds me of like a government program to encourage like one thing or another, and like completely falling on its face. And that's essentially what it is. It's you need markets and entrepreneurs to make that sort of thing work, not centralized authority.
Do you consider yourself a Bitcoin maximalist?
Yes, I do. Yeah, totally a maximalist. I think Bitcoin is qualitatively different than every other cryptocurrency. It's got that property of decentralization, which no other coin has. And like, I know people like to say, oh, decentralization is a spectrum or something like that. No, it's not. It's very specific. You're either sovereign over your own money, or you're not. If you're sovereign over your own money, then it's a decentralized money. If you're not sovereign over your money, if somebody could take it away, if somebody could hard fork it away, if somebody can bail somebody out, or change things, or take that property away from you in some way, shape, or form through choke points or all sorts of other things, then it's not really self-sovereign money. And that means that it's not politically neutral. That means that none of these things happen. So, Bitcoin is very unique in that regard, and I think that's why I'm a maximalist. It's qualitatively different.
Absolutely. So, given that, what are your thoughts on privacy? Because Bitcoin is inherently pseudonymous. If you wanted to track a transaction and you knew how to and which wallet it came from, you could essentially track it.
Sure.
So, do you think Bitcoin has something to improve in terms of privacy?
I think stuff like Taproot and Schnorr will give us additional privacy features. So right now, you can kind of tell when something is a multi-sig, possibly, and things like that. With Schnorr, you just can't, and with Taproot, you only find out the way in which it got unlocked, and not all the other paths that it might have gotten unlocked, and so on. So there are things like that, but the thing about privacy is you're never really going to get perfect privacy. It's just an impossible thing. We're leaking data all the time, just by being human, just by walking around, by being present in one place versus another, and so on. And there's almost an obsessive desire to create sort of like a perfect privacy environment on the part of some people, and I just don't think that's possible. And I'd like as much privacy as is practical, but there's a theorem regarding all of this. You can have perfectly binding currency or perfectly hiding currency. So binding means that 21 million limit will always be respected. Hiding means that no one is able to trace one or the other, but you don't have the 21 million guarantee. You can't have both. So based on that, I think the 21 million limit's way more important. So for me, privacy is a nice thing to have, but the much more socially beneficial thing is the actual true scarcity that no one can mess with, and that's what I think Bitcoin allows.
And how about government control? Especially in the US, it has been a big talk on Bitcoin, especially this year, and with the ETF and with the SEC getting everywhere. And do you think governments should be allowed to get information on KYCs from exchanges or such, or to find a form of taxation on Bitcoin? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm a libertarian. I think taxation is theft, and I think a lot of what the government's doing with AML KYC laws are horribly oppressive, and so on. So that's my opinion on it. And now the reality is, of course, every exchange needs to do AML KYC, or their bank account gets frozen and they lose all their money, and so on. But it sort of illustrates the point, right? If you are in the traditional financial system, this is the lever that the government always has over you, which is that they could take your money away, and this is always how they control and oppress their people. And the U.S. is relatively good in that regard, but you go to any truly oppressive country, and they will take away your money from almost anything. If they don't like you, they'll do it. And this is the sad reality of the current system, is that monetary oppression is the biggest form of oppression there is, because in a sense it's taking away your property rights, and from a practical standpoint that matters much more than, say, freedom of speech or whatever. If they can take your stuff away, well, your right to say anything doesn't really matter, because you no longer have any possessions to be able to do anything about it. So it's a sad reality of the world today.
So if you could fix it, and let's say that there's this utopic country that it works perfectly as you want, how would it work?
How would it work? Well, you'd
at least financially.
I mean, financially, I think you run on Bitcoin, and maybe you have a small. Well, I mean, there's an argument to be made that you could have sort of like market-based adjudication or something like that, that people agree to and so on. The thing that you want to have are violent crimes and stuff, that sort of thing being punished by some sort of central authority. I don't think you can really avoid that for that. But I mean, that's kind of what we had for a lot of the gold standard, especially in the United States and stuff. The government pretty much left you alone unless you were like a really bad criminal, in which case they tried to catch you, and even that was outsourced to people like, here's a reward if you could catch this guy, right? Something like that I think would be a lot fairer and a lot better, and I think it would spur a lot more innovation. A lot of people think that most of the innovation today came from the 20th century. Actually, on a per capita basis, I think a lot more innovation happened in the 19th century. Steam engine railroads, figuring out uses of oil, and Panama Canal, and Suez. I'm not sure when Suez was probably later, but like a lot of this stuff was done without any government subsidy, right? And done really, really well. And this is what you can get when you have a lot of people that can store their wealth, and they can accumulate capital and invest in stuff that's a profit-making enterprise. It turns out profit's a great motivator for people to build some amazing things. So, that's the sort of society I envision that I think that Bitcoin can bring about by taking the power of money away from the state.
Fantastic. I think this was one of the most fun interviews I've done today.
Well, thank you.
It was very interesting. Thank you for being with us. Is there anything you would like to say to our friends at Crypto Noticias?
Okay, so
we're based in Latin America, so that's
just pretty much everybody in Latin America. My book is available.
Your book, we didn't speak about the book.
Yeah, okay.
You're right, I had that in mind.
Okay,
so
all right.
Let's speak about the book a little bit.
So this is El Pequeño Libro de Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We did, we wrote it in English first, but it's a book just like that describes Bitcoin to somebody that might not know anything. And the 8 of us in this picture wrote it over a period of 4 days. So we wrote the whole book in 4 days.
That was very fast.
Yeah, and it was.
I tried to write a definition of Bitcoin once, and it took me a month, and it wasn't well done. So that's an achievement.
Well, so it turns out that if you have a lot of people around you, you're more motivated to write and stuff. So that worked out really, really well. And I would love to do this again with another group and try to write something. But anyway, we're from all over the world, 5 different continents. Alejandro Machado is from Venezuela, and he was one of my co-authors. But this book is meant to be a very fast read, right? Like you can read. It's like the bulk of the book is in like 81 pages, and there's a 30-page Q&A section that you can refer to and stuff. But this book we wanted to write to give a perspective on Bitcoin that not a lot of people know about, which is it matters for people right now, right? Like in third world countries and so on. I mean, people in Venezuela, like they're taking.
I'd love to do an airdrop on that book.
Yeah. Like they're trying to leave the Maduro regime because they're being oppressed. So they sell all their possessions, take it in Bitcoin, cross the border, go to Colombia, sell it. And there's now a discount apparently in Colombia for Bitcoin, which Alejandro was telling me. Now he wants to make a business, buy Bitcoins in Colombia and sell them in Venezuela as a way to equalize that and make a profit at the same time. But that's what this book is about. It's talking about what's wrong with money today, what what Bitcoin is, where the price comes from, why it matters for human rights, and what sort of future we can expect once Bitcoin really takes off. So I think your viewers might appreciate this sort of book, and we've all had those conversations with our relatives, right?
Yeah.
Like would that take like 3 hours and they don't quite get it, and
they end up buying on Coinbase.
yeah. And they don't really understand, and they keep asking you questions, and like it's like a burden, right? Because like anytime they don't understand something, they just call you.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this Bitcoin went down $20. What's going on, right? Like, and they expect you to know whatever. This is a very good way to save some time, right? Like you just hand them this book, and it's like, your uncle at Thanksgiving dinner or something like that. Okay, here you go. Instead of having a 4-hour conversation right now, why don't you just read this book? And then, I'll try to answer any questions you might have. And that's a lot easier of an experience for people, and a lot less taxing on your mental faculties. So that's my pitch for why you should buy this and hand it out to all your relatives that might be interested.
Where can our readers buy it?
It's on Amazon, so I think various Amazon stores in Latin America. Right? It's available on all of them. We have a Portuguese translation that's almost done.
Fantastic.
So that'll be out as well for those of you in Brazil. Hindi is coming out as well. We're working on Arabic, Turkish, Mandarin, Korean, Japanese, possibly Vietnamese, and French, Dutch, German.
So most languages.
Yeah, Russian, even Czech. Elena is one of my co-authors, so she wants to do it in Czech.
Elena is fantastic.
Yeah, so between all of those, like we want to distribute this as widely as possible. We've sold something like, I think in the first couple months we sold something like 5,000 copies, and as authors we decided, you know what, we're gonna pour all this money into translation. We're gonna translate this to every language that we can, and we want this distributed as widely as possible so that more people understand it, and they can just more people can understand what's so good about it, and hopefully use it as a good store value. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing your book and all your thoughts, and I hope to see you again.
Yeah.
Hopefully next year we can repeat this interview and see if anything has changed.
Let's hope it has. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.